Hello and welcome to Your Free Voice with me, your host, Julia Norton. This podcast is for people who use their voice professionally or for fun, and they want to understand how it works a bit better, or to get over old stories that might be holding them back. Whatever level you're playing at right now, my goal is to bring you lots of actionable stuff from the technical to the creative to the deeply woo to help you free your voice.
Ompa ompa om ompa om ompa ompa om ompa om ompa ompa om
Hello and welcome to episode 1 of Your Free Voice. In this episode, I want to talk a little bit about the idea of what is a free voice. It has all kinds of connotations, from the metaphorical to the literal. And we can look at it in terms of the mechanics of the voice. And we can look at it in terms of how much we feel able to speak our truth. So it's a massive topic, actually. I'm going to start off with a couple of little quotes just to kind of get us going. Kristin Linklater, from her book Freeing the Natural Voice, says, and I'm going to read this bit here, says, "To free the voice is to free the person. And each person is indivisibly mind and body. Since physical processes generate the sound of the voice, the inner muscles of the body must be free to receive the sensitive impulses from the brain that create speech." That's Kristin Linklater, Freeing the Natural Voice. I'm going to have a whole episode on Kristin Linklater later on, but I just wanted to introduce that concept to you, that it's the idea of being free of the physical tension, but also psychological limitations and creative limitations. Depending on where you grow up in the world, there's going to be a certain set of cultural expectations of what's appropriate and what isn't appropriate. And what isn't appropriate gets put into shadow. It doesn't mean it's bad. It's the Jungian term for the stuff that isn't supposed to be seen. So I don't want to get too deep into shadow right immediately in episode 1, but say, for example, you grow up in a house full of athletes and athletic types, but you really want to write poetry. Your desire to write poetry might get pushed into shadow because it's not kind of an acceptable way to express yourself in that environment. Now, it doesn't mean that writing poetry is a bad thing at all. In fact, it would probably be a wonderful thing, but it got pushed into shadow nonetheless. So our shadow, the side of us that is a buried side, often has all kinds of treasure for us. I'm sure I will go into way more detail about that later, but I just want to talk about the idea of what stops our voice from being free. So often it's either this feeling that we can't speak our truth, or something terrible will happen. There will be consequences that we won't be able to bear, or that we'll put somebody else in danger by speaking our truth, or that it's socially inappropriate to speak our truth. And all of this kind of builds layers of holding in the body, which manifests in the actual musculature of how we use our voice. So it becomes a physical thing, right? So it may start off as a psychological or a spiritual block or stall, and then it becomes physical. And so I think to work just physically with the voice, we're kind of missing half of the story. Because half of the story is how you feel about your voice. What are the stories that you're carrying that tell you that you can't speak up, or you can't be loud, or you can't be angry, or you can't be, a myriad of other things. So in order to have a fully free voice, and by that I'm going to say a voice that is unencumbered with physical tension and doesn't fatigue easily, that recovers quickly from hard effort. To have a free voice, you need to take into account the spiritual, the psychological, and the physical, right? So I'm going to attempt to bring that together more in this podcast. I'm going to invite some super people on to talk more about it. But I'm just going to give you this little passage from Kristin Linklater here. She writes, "Physical awareness and relaxation are the first steps in the work to be done on the voice. The mind and body must learn to cooperate in activating and releasing inner impulses and dissolving physical inhibitions. Actors must develop bodies that are sensitive and integrated rather than super-controlled and muscular. They must educate the voice into the union of self and body. The voice communicates the inner world of the psyche to the outer world of attentive listeners, both on the stage and in life." I absolutely love that chunk there, and it actually leads me into the training that I did in the UK, voice movement therapy training. I had been teaching group harmony singing workshops when I was about, I think I was 19 or 20 when I led my first one. I rented a community, like a community hall space, and I sold tickets, and I said, I'm going to teach you some Bulgarian part harmonies, and maybe, like I was doing part harmony singing workshop. And I found that people would always cry. They would cry from a deep breathing exercise. They would cry when we hit a certain harmonic resonance. There would always be tears. And at the age of 19, I totally understood that this was a real thing, and I felt completely ill-equipped to be able to deal with it, to be able to bring people through on that journey. And so I actually stopped running workshops for a bit, and I went on this quest to find some training that would help me understand how the voice works with the psyche, with the soul. And it took a little while. I think I was looking for about 8 years. And then I found Paul Newham's training in voice movement therapy in the UK, and I signed up right away. Like, it was like, oh my goodness, that is exactly the thing that I need. It was this combination of physical, psychological, practical, creative approach to the voice. And for the first time, it seemed like it was dealing with the whole person and not just the larynx. And I absolutely loved that approach. And that's where, the core of my teaching has been ever since, is in there. And I've just embellished and added on to that since then. But Alfred Wolfson, who was the inspiration for Paul Newham's work, he also inspired Roy Hart to create Roy Hart Theatre. I'll get more into all that later. I don't want to ramble on too much about that right now. But Alfred Wolfson, he said, the voice is the muscle of the soul. And that is just so lovely, and it feels so true to me. When we feel repressed in our voice, when our vocal apparatus feels either physically limited or metaphorically like we can't speak up, it's crushing. If you've ever had that experience, it is like having, somatically I've felt like my chest has been pressed on, or I felt like I had some big lump in my throat. There's a reason that that's a thing that people say. I feel like there's like a big lump in your throat, or I've had students talk about feeling like they have burning coals in their throat, or like they've swallowed something that they can't. And this is all this kind of physical manifestation of feeling like your voice isn't free. So that's what we're here to do. That's what this podcast is going to be about, is about freeing the voice on all those levels, from the deep psychological place, as much as we can do in a podcast. I mean, I just want to help to give you some tools to think about your voice maybe a little bit differently, and also practical things. like understanding how important it is to be physically engaged, to be physically warmed up before you sing or do a voiceover session or go on stage. You have to be physically warmed up, and I'm going to show you how to do all that as well. But for this week, just to get us started, I want you to pull out a journal and answer these 5 questions, okay? Here we go. I'll put a link to this in the show notes if you want to grab a PDF too. Number 1, how do you feel about speaking up or singing in public? Number 2, how easy is it for you to colour outside of the lines when you use your voice? Be creative, experiment, make up funny voices, improvise, those kinds of things. So number 2, how easy is it for you to colour outside of the lines when you use your voice? Number 3, how does your voice feel after extended use? So giving a big presentation, reading an audio book, a video game session, teaching all day. How does your voice feel after that? That's number 3. Number 4, if you could do anything with your voice, what would it be? Just anything. Don't hold yourself back. Number 5, what do you think is stopping you from doing that right now? Okay, brilliant. Now I'll put those questions, like I said, in the show notes, which you can also find at yourfreevoice.com/podcast. And I'll add a couple of links in there for the book and the IAVMT, which is the International Association for Voice Movement Therapy as well. Next episode, we're going to jump straight into warm-ups, how to create a great warm-up for yourself. So there'll be lots more dancing, moving and stretching and less of me just going blah, blah, blah. So that's what next episode is going to be like, and I hope to see you there. Okay, bye. Thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate you being here. If you had a chance, could you help me out and write a review and rate this on iTunes? Because otherwise I'm going to be buried so deep in the algorithm, nobody's going to ever find me. Okay, thanks a lot. See you next time. Bye-bye.
Om